Happy?
Yep. I talk a lot about fine margins in comps and how big a difference it makes. And it doesn't matter whether it's missing a fish with a landing net because you've not got it rigged right, missing a fish on the nymph because you're not concentrating on that one drift, as well as all the other drifts you've made, or any one of 100 other things that could go wrong. It can mean the difference between being first, second, third, fourth. And I still make plenty of mistakes. God, I'm far from perfect, but it is fine margins.
I now, on behalf of Fitzbush, declare the 43rd World Fly Fishing Championship open. Thank you.
Many of you will already realise that Howard has had a massive influence on the fly fishing market in general. He lives, breathes and sleeps fly fishing. He works as a rod designer for Grays and Hardy, producing some of the finest rods out there. And as anything in Howard's life, he's always thinking out of the box and looking for the best solution for the problem at hand.
Howard Croston, he's been a member of the English team pretty much since I can remember. A bunch of Howard's teammates call him Smiley. And so that's my favorite name for him now. And the reason why they call him Smiley is because often Howard appears so serious. He's really dedicated to the sport of fly fishing and to what we do. And he might come off as, a stern-faced individual as a result, which is why it's a fun, ironic name. But Howard's a stand-up guy who has put his heart and soul into competitive fly fishing and fly fishing in general his whole life.
I think for me, the appeal of fishing and the appeal of, you could say the appeal of fly fishing, but really fishing in general, is that it is absolutely a sport, hobby, pastime, whatever you want to call it, for life, because you can't master it. It's impossible. There's too much. It's too big a sphere. There's too many aspects to it, and that is what keeps me motivated to keep fishing. I started fishing when I was really young. I can't actually remember exactly how old I was, but I started off, like a lot of kids do I suppose, worm fishing on rivers in the Lake District. With my parents, luckily we had a holiday home right next to a really good trout river, and I started fishing there. And I can't actually really remember vividly the day that I sort of flipped from doing a bit of bait fishing and fly fishing to just fly fishing. There was basically just a great big hatch of fly and a rise of fish, and I couldn't catch them at all on worms. And I caught a load with my fly rod, and that was it. I never picked the worm rod up again. Because I did a lot of river fishing, the first competition that I came across was an England qualifier to get in the England Rivers National Final. And strangely enough, it was held in Scotland on a Scottish river, even though it was an English competition. And I just entered it on the spur of the moment. I went up, it was on the Tweed and the Teviot. There was about 65 anglers in it, which those competitions used to be really big. Unfortunately, they're not quite as big now. And I went off, I fished, I caught 2 fish, because the river was flooded, it was hard conditions. Came back to the car park for the weigh-in, expecting not to have done very well, and I'd actually won it. There'd only been about 6 other fish caught, and they'd all caught ones, and I'd had 2. And that was really the first competition I entered, and I got a taste for it after that. There we go. There's a fish. Again, that's in that shallower water, really surprising. Wouldn't have thought they'd be that. Yeah, so the biggest event in the year for me is always the Worlds, and it has been for a long time.
The World Fly Fishing Championships, pretty much in the name. It's a competition that's organized by FIPS Moosh, which is basically the International Federation of Sport Fly Fishing. And they are kind of like the International Olympic Committee of competitive fly fishing. And so they organize the World Championships every year, or at least choose an organizer who then puts the championships on. And it's basically the highlight of the competitive season each year.
I've fished pretty much every World since 2004, I think. I did 1 year where I was dropped by the manager into the European squad, but I've pretty much fished every single World Championships since about 2004, probably before actually, maybe 3. I can't really remember. But it's the biggest thing of the year for me, and usually the planning for the next one starts as soon as I come back from one. I mean, fly fishing, as the wife will tell you, is literally, you know, my 24/7, 365. Really, it's pretty much everything. I have in the past done other sports as well a little bit, but it really is the fishing piece that sort of, you know, is all consuming.
I sometimes think he loves fishing more than he loves me. I don't know how true that is, but yeah, he is obsessive about it, and I think ultimately that's what makes you as good as you are. You have to be obsessive about it. Often we'll go out on a boat at a local fishery called Sweet Hope Loch, and spending 8 hours in a day in a boat with Howard is interesting. You know, for me, a day's fishing, because I am not competitive in the slightest, for me a day's fishing is all about, you know, catching fish, of course, but relaxing, enjoying each other's company. I always like a nice picnic. Whereas for Howard, he likes to use that time to be competitive against me, to try new tactics out, and he doesn't always win. No, right, there's a fish coming. Oh, here you go. Let's use the line bridge. Yes. Hope you got that, Patrick.
Come on, babe. Let's go.
It's a nice fish. On a dry. See that? There's loads around here, loads.
So we'll head up. This is a limited access area, I'm afraid. This is the sanctuary, if you like. It's really where I do a lot of my prep for the Worlds, a lot of my fly tying, a lot of modification of my gear. I actually do a little bit of work up here as well sometimes. And it's really just a collection of memorabilia as well, amassed from, 35 plus years fly fishing. I mean, I tend to collect things when I'm travelling. You know, business cards, little maps from places I've been, and you know, I'll keep a few bits and pieces of gear that I've designed and developed over the years. Mainly stuff that's got a lot of memories attached to it. You know, I caught my first tarpon on one of these big Fortuners that we designed. A few medals and trophies and bits and pieces. I had quite a long career as a competitive fly caster before I actually got into competition fishing. Yeah, and then I keep all my England hats. I don't even know how many of them I've got. I think I've got 31 maybe now altogether. My first England cap, rather strangely, was in the lock style. I actually got my lock style cap first, I believe. It was lock leaving, I think. And yeah, it was, I mean, an incredible feeling. I mean, it doesn't really surpass the first time that you sort of represent England at world or European level. Then it takes on a whole different level of excitement, anticipation, and gravitas if you're a competition angler. It is really the benchmark that I think everyone should, if they're into competition fishing, should try and strive for. So the Worlds this year, it's going to be in France. It's in, I think it's the Occitania region, it's pronounced something like that. It's basically in the mountains. We're fishing 3 very different rivers and 2 very different chains of high altitude alpine lakes. So very, very varied. In terms of preparation, I've been doing a lot of practice, not as much as I would like.
So Howard's prep for the Worlds begins the day he gets back from the Worlds the year before, and that then continues through the next however many months up until the next Worlds, to fly tying, to leader tying, to wander around my house, you know, attaching, reattaching a net to the back of his jacket while I'm in the middle of watching evening television. It's always an interesting experience. It manifests in a lot of different ways, and as the months, you know, get closer to the next Worlds, that only intensifies.
I always practice how I'm going to fish, so it'll probably be a 2-rod match, two main lines of attack anyway. So one of them's going to be probably in France, the long or longish Euro nymph rod, for want of a better description, that you can do all your tight line stuff off, including some dry dropper. Other one, dry fly, longer range dry dropper. It's a longer rod, sorry, shorter rod, 9.9 3-weight. There's no point practicing one way and then changing it before the comp. So we're like 2 months out now, so everything is getting to the point where it's as per the comp will be. It's good. So there we go. We'll have a wander down and we'll have what's called a power hour. So I mean, this is my local, if you like. This is like literally 5 minutes from the house. It's just a small freestone river. It gets plagued with a lot of high water and excessively low water, so it's not, in all honesty, it's not brilliant fishing sometimes, but it's close. And it's the first time all season it's been low enough to actually get in and practice. So really what I'm doing is a power hour, which is, it's after work now, it's a Friday, it's 4 o'clock. So I'm going to come down and do an hour, fish hard for an hour, go home. And to be honest, in the run up to the Worlds, I start to pile as many power hours as I can in during the week, evenings, occasionally early mornings, because it's just about, a lot of it is just about polishing everything and refining everything, and really making sure any modifications I've made over the winter, made a lot of changes to this winter, work effectively and efficiently. One of the main things is the nets, getting them on and off all the time when you're fishing and you're catching a lot of fish without having to go looking for a magnet all the time. So I've spent hours in the winter walking around the house doing that to get all the magnet placements right, all that kind of stuff. Yes, it's obsessive, but you know, World Championships come down to 1 and 2 fish sometimes, so you've got to do it. What I'm starting to do is look for ways I can be, not ways I can be more efficient, because I know to be efficient, but I'm looking to make the right cast every cast and make every time that fly goes in and drifts count. And that's just practice. You know, unfortunately at Worlds, now you're fishing against people who sometimes fish every single day. And you know, we can't do that, I can't do that, I've got a job to do. And frankly now, with the weather the way it is, the conditions don't allow us to do that sometimes. So every minute you can spend in the river, polishing, repeating, tweaking, doing things a little bit different sometimes just to see if they're any better, it all pays off in the long run. Yeah, we've got nagging upstream wind that we've had all season, which really messes your control up, especially when you're on leaders like this. This is a 0-12 main leader, so it's extremely thin I don't actually know if I'll need to fish it that fine in France, to be honest. But what I'll do is I will fish it, because it's the worst case. If I can get away with heavier, I'll fish heavier. But I'd rather be well practiced with the worst case than having to work it out in 2 weeks of practice. There's this quite funny concept that, or opinion kicking around, that Euro-nymphing is a really skill-less form of fishing, where you just use some beads and you fling them out and they drag the line out, and anybody can do it and it's dead easy and you catch loads of fish. It is a really effective method, but doing it well and fishing with lightweight flies and a very, very lightweight main leader is more challenging than most people think, especially to do it well and do it accurately. There's one. It's a tiny little thing, but because we're coming up to the comp, do what I always do and I'll net it. I mean, it's not worth netting. You wouldn't net it normally. Just a little tiny part. Back he goes, none the worse for wear. I can remember my first World Championships, I fished as reserve, which was in Finland, I think it was, and it's a bit different when you're reserve, because you've only got one job to do. You've got one session to fish, or you might have two, or sometimes you don't fish at all. In that one, I happened to fish one. I placed in the top 5. You know, I did my job, but that was it over for me after that one session, and then it was just all about how the team did. In all honesty, and this is the bit a lot of people find really hard to swallow, I think, is when you go through the home international scene in the UK and you sort of then drop into European and Worlds, you're going from a different rule set and a competition fished under different format into the most competitive competition there is for fly fishing. And there's a massive gulf between the level, home international level, and world and European level. A lot of people don't understand that. And I mistakenly, in my first full World Championships, or even first European Championships, I turned up and I honestly thought, right, I'm going to beat everybody here. I'm going to be right up there, I'll be in the mix, I'll be fighting for the medals, and I was nowhere near. And it took a few years of, excuse making, in all honesty, going, oh well, I didn't get the beats, or this happened, or that happened, before I realised that I just wasn't competitive because I wasn't good enough, in all honesty. And at that point then, I stopped focusing on fishing home internationals. I fished enough home internationals to stay eligible to be selected for World and European, but I started doing all of my own fishing to FIPS rules in a similar format, as close a format as I could make it for World and Europeans at home, and I did some travelling. I went to some foreign countries and I fished with some very good competition anglers from those countries and learned a lot. And I even fished a few competitions in different countries like Italy and various places. And my learning curve went through the roof and I started to get much better results. These big canvases are all from photo shoots. So I've worked for Hardy's for 21 years now, Hardy and Grays, and these are all large format shots that were taken on film, because quite a few years old, they're not digital or anything, from like the likes of Cuba and France. And, yeah, I've been lucky. That was a big boar that I caught out the Madison. That was my big permit, 30-mile-an-hour winds, big bonefish, Schloss Rockus, great hammerhead shark, big grayling at the test. Me and a good friend of mine, Oliver Edwards, sadly no longer with us, he passed away last year. Broke the mould when they made Oliver. And my dad, he got me into fishing with my uncle. That's one thing that does bother me. He was never around to see me win the worlds individually. He always knew I would, to be fair, but unfortunately he passed away just before. In 2019, I was really fortunate. I was world champion individually, which is just a massive thing for me, a massive moment. I'd been close before. 2012, I'd started to get my head sort of screwed on with it all and working things out, and had a really good event in Slovenia. And then when we went to Taz in 2019, it just sort of fell right for me, and I fished well. You know, over those 5 days, I made very few mistakes. I lost very few fish. And up until the start of session 5 on the last day, I never really thought about it. I was posting good results. I was staying in the medal positions, but it never really crossed my mind that I was on the verge of being world champion until the morning of the 5th session, when I was in the lead and it was on a lakes, and it was really then down to me to either win it or lose it. Funny enough, the guy who was in second place, the Italian guy Federico Santamantini, was in my group also, so we were both out on the lake together. And I went out and fished. I think I caught 5, which wasn't bad. And I came back in, and of course the first person I was looking for was Federico, because he's the imminent threat. He beats me, I fall below him, you know, and it's over. And he wasn't there. So one of the Australians who I knew came over and said, oh, he's still fishing. His boat broke down. They've had to change his engine, so he's got an extra 30 minutes to fish. So I had to wait on the bank while he was still fishing. And I found, I think it was the Canadian captain, and I said, oh, have you seen him? And he said, oh yeah, I've been watching him. And I said, well, has he caught anything? He says, I saw him catch 3 in 15 minutes. Well, you know, it had taken me 4 hours to catch 5, and I'm thinking, I'm in trouble, you know, this is a problem. I saw his boat coming, and I went to the edge of the bank. He saw me, and obviously it's the universal fishing sign between competitors. You point at each other, you know, wanting to see how many fish they've caught. And he pointed at me because he was obviously keen to know if he'd beat me. So I stuck 5 fingers up, and he stuck 4 up. Then you start to think of everybody else in the other groups. And I didn't have a big enough points margin to guarantee that I'd won. And the drive home on the coach for the next 2 hours was just... And as it turned out, I had won, but it was an absolute nail-biter. We were drawn on points. I didn't have a points margin, but I had a fish points margin. And those fish points, when I look back now, and I looked at the results very closely afterwards, over 5 days of competitive fishing, there were 3 fish, which if any one of those 3 fish had come off, I wouldn't have won. I'd have been 2nd, 3rd, 4th. So it came down to landing 3 fish across 5 days, fishing 4 hours a day, and any one of those fish had come off. And the whole game is fine margins, and that's the one thing a lot of people don't grasp, is how fine the margins are. So, you know, all that mania and that obsessing about all the little bits and pieces, that's what really gets you over the line sometimes. So what I do is I keep a log book. It's not a fancy log book with loads of information in, but what I do is I'll put in the date, where I've been, what I've been doing, and I'll put in it things like if I said had like 10 chances of fish and I've only landed 5 for whatever reason, either by missing them or losing them or whatever, I'll put in 10 chances 5 landed, and it gives me an idea as I'm getting further along the road towards competition if I need to start improving on things and practicing things. And I do it really because I don't get a chance to fish as much as I used to. And this year, I mean, this should have about 4 pages in it by now. That's what's in it, and that's because of the water levels. This spring it's been abysmal. So I think this is about day number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. This is the 10th day's fishing, not even day, I've had an hour today. The 10th time I've river fished since the 15th of March. So we're about 6 weeks into the season. It's not a lot compared to what I'd normally do. I'd normally be out at night and all sorts, but the river's been too high. So we'll stick it in, and hopefully it'll be a lot fuller come the comp. 19th, I've been down the Wansbeck, it's my local river. I've had 5 landed. I had 4 other chances. So 5 for the day, and I will just put in what I got them on. So I got them on the nymph. 2.8mm bead. I never even bother with the pattern, stuff like that. I did have 2 flies on, so I'll put 2 there. and that's it. And I'll just go. I think the World Championships are important for fly fishing in general, really, for a few reasons. I mean, the whole thing about the World Championships, although it's very, very competitive, and it is a competition, at the end of the day, it's all fished to, you know, the sort of Olympic ideal of, you know, camaraderie and friendship in fishing and all that kind of stuff. And although we all compete really vehemently against each other, at the end of it, everybody who's there, we're all friendly. You know, we all get together every year, you see a lot of the same faces, you meet a lot of the same people year in, year out, and they become lifelong friends, they really do. So even in that respect, it's a really important thing, I think, for the ethos of fly fishing, because you have anglers coming from all over the world who mix together, and you see different kinds of fishing, different techniques, and it all trickles down. You know, a lot of the methods now that pleasure anglers use, even if you just take the UK as an example, are derived from competition fishing, be it home international or world level. All of that stuff sort of trickles down. You know, developments in equipment, you know, from my job as a fish and tackle developer for Hardy and Grays, you know, a lot of the stuff that goes into our product has trickled down from what has been, you know, developed or pioneered in competition fishing. And I think it's good for the sport to have an event that's as prestigious as that. You know, there's less people fishing now in general, and there's less people fly fishing, and it's difficult to get younger anglers interested in it. I think having you know, like a vibrant competition scene is maybe something that could pull more young anglers into fishing away from their Xboxes, because maybe to them normal fishing seems a little bit boring, but competitive fishing is anything but boring. There's all sorts involved in it. There's adrenaline, there's technical ability, you've got to be fit. You know, it's been something that's driven my fishing over the years. It's helped with my enjoyment of fishing, it's helped with my learning and my understanding of fishing. And I think really it's an integral part, and it should be an integral part of fly fishing, hopefully for many years to come. Just a beautiful little wild fish. This is just really, to be honest, it's a variation on the thread quill pattern. I say variation, it's effectively the same fly. It's just a slightly different colour. For no other reason than it just so happens it's the thread I've got in my bobbin. I'm going to be on the river tomorrow and for a team practice. And the river is high, it's ripping, and I need some flies with some significant weight. That'll hunt. I'll get some fish with that tomorrow.